Hey guys, this tutorial I'm going to cover the image trace tool. With the image trace tool, you are able to trace bitmap images and convert into vector without having to use the pen tool whatsoever. So let's say that you have a client and they want you to create a sketch, and it's your job to recreate in a usable vector format. You got two options. You can either create a template of that set object, that set drawing or sketch, and do it all by hand and using the pen tool or whatever, or you can use the image trace feature. So I have a couple of little samples to show you now. I just downloaded some photos from online. This is all bitmap images. Some of them are JPEGs, PNG files. And the reason why I copied this one multiple times because I wanted to show you all the different features that you can do with the image trace. There's two ways to go about this. If you select the actual photograph, notice that the actual properties bar here will give you the image trace options, and you could click down here and here for all the presets available to you, and you can select each one of these and see what they can do. And once you apply it, you can just hit the expand feature right after it's applied, and it converts it to vector format. But let me show you the actual palette, the image trace palette, by going into Windows, Image Trace. So the palette shows up. If you don't have these options available, you just click on the Advanced tab here, and you have all these other options here. So let's take this little robot character guy. So I'm going to grab my zoom tool. I'm going to zoom in on this for a little bit, and I'm going to move it over with the space bar. So I select this character. So here are some of the regular presets. You can have it set to a sketch art or shades of gray. Use only 6 colors or 16 colors. But what I really want to show you right now, I'm going to use the tiger sample to show you what these other custom presets does. So under the color mode, let's say that I just want a black and white artwork. Now make sure that you have your preview button down here selected. And notice that it converted it to just a black and white object. You want to make sure that you have the ignore white box checked. Otherwise, it will fill all the white areas with a vector path. So like, for example, the outer perimeter box would be filled with a vector path, and inside here, what would be the compound path would also be filled with a white color. So I like to have the ignore white part here checked. The threshold will determine the amount of black that gets distributed. So if you have a less threshold, then obviously you'll get a much more line artwork, or you can add more black to it if you want much more color around that image. So I think that this looks good to me. Maybe a little bit less if I want just a complete line art of it. But then again, it does sacrifice some details a little bit. It all depends on the actual quality of the original image and how much resolution does it have. It'll affect the actual vector paths. Under the paths here, you can set it to a different percentages so that it can come out with like cleaner anchor points. And to apply this, to convert this into a vector, you can go to the Objects menu up on top, Live Image Trace, and hit Expand. And notice now that if I view this in Outline View mode, I now have my vector shapes. So it's really cool. It's a very fast way and convenient way to just retrace or redraw some items. But here is the downside to some of this feature. It's not always accurate. You may have to start playing with the threshold settings so you can clean up some of these items. So you can just grab in your indirect group selection tool. You can select some of those unwanted areas and just delete them. You can also zoom in on here and click on those paths that you don't want and try to get this as clean as possible as you need to. You may have to use the eraser tool, or you may have to use the scissors tools, like cut this path here, cut it here, and then you can delete that part of the shape. But then you'll have to come back in here with the pen tool, reestablish the connection, and close that out. So there might be some cleanup done, but regardless, it'll still save you so much time instead of just converting this to a template layer and retracing the whole thing with the pen tool. Now let's see what it looks like if we convert this to color. Now keep in mind that this is not a smooth transitional blend. It's meant to look like in vector. It's meant to look all stacked out. So instead of the color mode being black and white, we can select color, and then we can tell it to do maybe 16 different colors, and watch what happens. Here's the magic. So now it's trying to read the filters, and it converts all these into vector objects. And the next thing you need to do is select the objects menu, image trace, and expand. And now check it out. Oh, I didn't hit ignore white. This is what happens when you don't hit ignore white. So now this becomes a path, and this becomes a path. See that? And view. Let's try that again. I'm going to undo that. And now I'm going to select ignore white. Go back to my preview mode over here. And now I'm going to expand. Now notice that once I selected the ignore white, I don't have those items selected. There we go. And outline view mode, here are all the vector paths. When to use this tool and when not to use this tool is going to have to be depending on the actual artwork that you have to trace. Any items that have something like a really complex that needs to be in full details, the amount of time that it'll take you to clean up the actual art files, chances are it'll probably be faster to just go ahead and put that into a template layer and retrace it with the pen tool. It all depends on the situation. Now for something simplistic like this, it's an absolute perfect tool. Let's say that I want to go ahead and try and retrace all these items. This is a placed JPEG file, and I want to do a black and white or a black and white logo or a sketch art, or just simply select a black and white image. And then here's my preview button, and look at that. Look at how beautiful it translated these objects. So now all I have to do, make sure that I have the ignore white selected, object, image trace, expand. And check this out, outline view mode. Now it's all in vector format. And it looks really, really close to the original. And it's a massive, massive time saver feature. Now, let me show you what each one of these filters do, each one of these presets do. So that's why I copied this over 11 times, because there are 11 presets. So with the tiger photo here, I can either use my palette, I can tell. I'm not going to tell it to ignore white because it is a photograph. I want some of these whites in here to be captured. I can go to the default, to the presets here, and I'm going to do one at a time. So I'm going to start from the very bottom and work my way up. So for technical drawing, now again, it depends on the amount of contrast that I have on the photograph. It will pick up items, and sometimes it won't. So for example, I have a lot of dark areas, so it's just going to give me a really technical drawing of what this photograph and how Illustrator translates these objects. So I'm going to expand that as well. And now this one, I'm going to select the line art feature, and it's not going to give me that much more details to that. So it's just going to give me like a brief outline section of that. And I'm going to expand again. And then this one here, I'm going to select the third one, which is a silhouette. And since there's not that much more highlights and contrast, it's not going to give me much options. But since I have a photograph, look, my expand button is available here on the top. So I just have to click expand as opposed to going to the drop-down menu. So this one here, I'm going to use the sketch art. And that's what this is. The sketch art is a popular one. It creates these wonderful black and white negative space effect. And then I'm going to select the next one up, which is the black and white logo. The sketch art and the black and white logo are the ones that are used the most in our industry. There's not that much of a difference between the two. Hit expand to get the vector objects. So then I'm going to select the shades of gray. Now what it does is it turns it to 256 shades of the color gray, and it converts it to grayscale. Now it looks a little bit much more like a watercolor effect. So if I zoom in on this here, it kind of reminds me of those paint by number things that I used to get when I was a kid. But I love the silhouette and the black and white sketch. So this is the grayscale. And now let's do I'm going to do the 3 color first, then 6 and 16. So this is the 3 color effect. It just picks out the 3 most common colors and converts that into vector. Now this one is going to pick the 6 colors, so it's going to be much more detailed. And then I can expand the vector paths and copy this one a couple more times. There. So now we see the difference between the 6 colors, the 3, 6, and 16 color. So now you have much more detail on that. So here it is all in vector. You can see how these paths generates much more complex. I'm going to expand my artboard a little bit longer and copy the tiger a couple more times. All right, so now this one, let's check out the low fidelity photo. Click on that. Now it does take a little bit much longer to render. And I get rid of that one because I have only one left, and that is the high fidelity photo. Be careful with using the high fidelity photo, guys, because it does take a little bit much more memory, and it'll take, and depending on the resolution of the placed photograph, it may take a little bit longer for it to render as well. So notice that it already converted to vector, but you couldn't really see the difference until I expanded. Now let's view these all in outline view mode. Notice how much detail the high fidelity photo and all the paths that it generates. So the grayscale one and the high fidelity photo generates the most paths and the most anchor points. So check this out. Again, like a paint by number, this is the 3 colors, the 6 colors, and the 16 colors. 16 colors looks pretty cool, but check out the photo one. Look at all these paths that it generates. But here's the one thing, though, that gets a little bit messy. So I'm going to grab my group selection tool. Each one of these paths here, they don't necessarily overlap. So if you need to do any kind of edits to this or color-wise, it gets a little bit much more complicated, and it does generate and create a bit of a mess. So again, use this tool wisely, as long as you don't need to create any kind of specific kind of edits. Now in this scenario, I'm just talking about the actual photographs. When it comes to something like this, to use for these kinds of features, it's an absolute perfect solution. However, if I need to make this ring a different color, I would have to probably cut all these paths along this item here, recreate the circle myself, and then make those edits that way. If I need to color these leaves individually, then I would have to probably come back in here, cut the paths along these lines, and then rejoin them, and then color the leaves individually. So again, it all depends on what your end results needs to look like, whether or not this tool is a good idea or not. If a client provides you with a logo that needs to be recreated, as long as it doesn't have any kind of typography and it's just an icon, yes, absolutely use the image trace feature so that you can save some time, but I would not recommend doing this with text. It does not come out, it just doesn't work very well with it. It all depends on the resolution of the image. whether it'll pick up all those details, especially with text with serifs. So yeah, guys, so that's the image trace feature in Illustrator. I hope you enjoy